What if Diamond had decided to toss her rules just a little bit earlier? What if she'd used her animus magic to help the Icewings win their war against the Nightwings? What if Darkstalker never had the chance to grow to the heights of power that he did 2,000 years ago? Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today I'm taking on a bit of a complicated one. What if the Icewings defeated the Nightwings in their war? 2,000 years before the Dragonette prophecy, which doesn't exist now, long before the events of most of my what-ifs. I'm going to paint some broad strokes and then focus on one story within this setup. But first, let's see how that original Icewing-Nightwing feud might have ended. Indigo had always known it was a mistake to travel so far from home. Fathom had been withering in the Kingdom of the Sea, it was true. Neither of them had truly recovered from seeing Albatross that night, but Fathom, with his own power, had been worse off than her. She had toyed with the idea of leaving, of finding some calm bay to spend a few years hiding in. But where Fathom went, she followed, and so they'd traveled to the other side of the world to the Night Kingdom. Now she was wishing she'd convinced him to go somewhere else. Clearsight had shown up at their rooms an hour ago, teary eyes wide as she shoved Indigo for the door. "We have to run," she'd said. "The Icewings found a way around Darkstalker's wall. He's dead." Indigo hadn't been much affected by that. Clearsight was mourning, obviously, but she and Darkstalker had no love lost between them. And then... "I'm sorry, Indigo. They killed Fathom, too." Her world tilted on its axis, the words not making sense to her at first. Clearsight shoved her off the balcony. There was an odd scent on the air, a sharp, cold scent so frigid it almost burned like fire. No, she blurted after a moment, wings snapping out to catch her as she followed Clearsight on instinct. Her spear was in their rooms. Indigo began to bank, wanting to grab it, needing to... "Indigo!" Clearsight shouted, snatching one of her talons. She pointed. Indigo followed her claw and saw glittering white Icewings soaring over the Nightwing canyons, streams of white spraying at fleeing Nightwings. "We have to run," she said. Indigo noticed for the first time the fine mist of glittering ice crystals along one side of Clearsight's neck. Like someone had sprayed frost breath at her and she'd been partially blocked by someone else. "They've already killed all the guards," she said breathlessly. "They won't stop. I can see it," she moaned, head twisting away. "It was all dark, but I can see it now. If we don't run now, we'll both die." Indigo wavered in the air. Fathom. Why was he dead? He couldn't be. She had to see him. "You don't have to see him," Clearsight said softly. "We have to survive." Eventually, they picked up enough news to piece together what had happened that night. Diamond and her Icewings had snuck in through the coast, rising from the water like vengeful spirits. The Queen had enchanted a knife to find all animus dragons working with the Nightwings. Clearsight had been with Darkstalker and Fathom when it found them. Darkstalker had been distracted trying to protect her from the Icewing guards, and hadn't seen the knife until it was too late. And apparently Fathom's stay with the Nightwings was enough to get him killed too. Rumor had it that the knife had found Arctic and forced him back to his mother. He'd been taken back to the Ice Kingdom and nobody had seen him since. Indigo didn't care about him. She never had. The Nightwing Kingdom was gone. Most of the Nightwings were gone too, she thought. She and Clearsight had headed east and not stopped, avoiding towns and villages as they tried to decide what to do. Indigo didn't want to go back to the sea. Not without Fathom. Clearsight couldn't really go anywhere. Indigo had risked poking through a few smaller towns for news and seen that the Icewings were circulating reports about the Nightwings, saying they'd gone crazy and tried to wipe out the Icewings only to be rebuffed. It was an inversion of the truth, but not one they could do anything about. Indigo didn't have the heart for the news. Her heart had already been pierced by an enchanted Icewing knife. She and Clearsight kept traveling east, doing whatever they could to avoid being seen. Winter sighed through his nose quietly and wished he were home. Not that home was much better than this, but at least at home he was ignored in proper weather. The desert was scathingly hot. He'd been sent with delegations before, not often, but ever since a hailstorm, it was as if nobody could stand to see his face anymore. He'd been on more delegations since then than some Icewings attended in their lives. Ostensibly, he was here to guard his sister. Icicle, heir to the throne, smartest sibling, top of the ranks, perfect Icewing, and, of course, animus dragon. She hadn't made her gift to the tribe yet. Glacier was putting her clever mind to use first, letting her lead parties to the other kingdoms they had alliances with. Why anyone thought he could protect Icicle was beyond him. She was an animus for Frost's sake. Sure, she was only going to use her power once, but in a pinch, he didn't doubt she'd do what it took to keep herself alive. Besides, she was custodian of their animus-touched items. The gift of seeing, which would warn her about any assassination attempts. The gift of silver tongues, which ensured their group would be convincing. And most importantly, the gift of shielding. The set of necklaces which protected their wearers from Nightwing mind reading. Winter did not have one. Not that he thought it would matter. Nightwings were so rare now he'd never seen one, and few dragons did. The Icewings had successfully kept their tribe from causing any more harm for centuries now. So here he was, the least favorite royal, stuck on a trip with the most favorite royal. There was sand in his scales, the harsh winds were constantly buffeting him and grinding more sand into him, the sun baked his wings until they cracked, and he had at least 2 more days before he could even hope to get home for a break. Oh, and one of the Queen's guards was the most annoying dragon he'd ever met. Winter had never, ever, in his entire life, met anyone who could flummox him as regularly and easily as that Sandwing. They were about the same age, but that was where the similarities ended. Keebly was shorter than Winter, with a rough accent to his speech, and a rolling laugh determined to come out at the most inappropriate times. He talked to everyone. Servants, visitors, other guards, even royals, like they were longtime friends. Winter had expected Queen Thorn to smack him across the hall for the bawdy joke he'd shared under his breath during the ceremonial dinner they'd had the other night. Winter had been just close enough to hear it on accident. But instead she'd twitched with laughter and smacked him discreetly with her tail. And for some reason he'd taken a liking to Winter. That was the only explanation for it. Winter had run into him twice as many times as any other Sandwing. He seemed determined to corrupt Winter with his weirdness and his disrespect and his poor manners. See, and now he's done it again, Winter thought sulkily. He's invaded my thoughts for no apparent reason. Winter had been wandering the halls of the palace. Not sulking, just licking his wounds, he thought morosely. He and Icicle had fought again, this time in front of the other Icewings and the Sandwings. He shared an idea on one of the trade agreements she was working on, and the verbal lashing she doled out for that had been spectacular, and lasting, and in front of other dragons. So he'd taken his leave, searching desperately for something to whittle down the hours until they could leave this strange place and go back home. At least at home everyone knew he was the failure prince, and they didn't act so surprised by it. He couldn't recall exactly how he'd gotten from there to here. Well, he could. Keebly had been on the Queen's guard detail again that day, and not long after Winter had snuck out, the Sandwing had followed him. And for once he'd been completely serious, not teasing or making jokes, as he told Winter that what Icicle had done wasn't okay. It had been a completely different side of Keebly. I know a thing or two about older siblings, he'd said wryly. They suck sometimes. Winter had thought about Hailstorm for a brief, painful moment. Keebly didn't know everything about older siblings, it seemed. And then Keebly had asked if he wanted to take a break from the palace and see something cool. And now, somehow, Winter found himself flying over a twilit desert with someone he'd considered supremely obnoxious until about 2 hours ago, heading for some oasis that was supposed to be ice cold. If it was true, it'd be worth it to get the sand out from his scales and let his body get blessedly cool. So they'd flown to the oasis, and that'd been cool. Keebly had even let Winter be for most of the flight. He could tell the Icewing was still stinging from his sister's treatment, and Keebly got that, so he gave him some time to, cool off. But then they'd gotten to the oasis, and there'd been 2 dragons there already, dark enough to be nearly invisible in the night. Nightwings. One was larger, lying on her side near the water. Her smooth scales reflected the moonlight with hints of blue and purple, and bits of silver shining under her wings. But Keebly's eyes had darted first to the raw wounds in her side. Claw marks slashed through the scales and raked over one leg, angry and painful looking. The other Nightwing had green hints along her underbelly and was smaller, closer to their age, he supposed, and she had been digging through a pouch. She whirled when they landed, even though they didn't make a sound. Winter froze as soon as he caught sight of them. "Nightwings!" he roared after a moment, drawing his head back and hissing in a barely familiar way. Keebly realized what Winter was about to do the moment before he sprayed frost breath at the Nightwing. He dove for the Icewing, shoving him so the shot went wide. Belatedly, he noticed the smaller Nightwing had scrambled to throw herself in front of the larger, before the shot had even come. "What are you doing?" Keebly demanded as Winter looked at him with wide eyes. "Me?" he yelped. "What are you doing?" His head whipped back to the Nightwings. The smaller looked panicked herself, standing over her companion with her wings shaking. "They're dangerous," Winter shouted. Keebly spluttered. "Do they look dangerous to you?" he demanded. Winter hissed at him. "Get off of me, you oaf," he shouted. "I need to go warn my sister." "Dude," Keebly countered. "She's like mega awful. Would you quit wiggling for 1 second?" He'd been pinning Winter down. Across the oasis, the smaller Nightwing looked like she didn't know what to do. She shifted talons nervously, still standing over her injured companion. She was even smaller than Keebly, he thought, and her friend was clearly hurt. "Winter," Keebly hissed, lowering his voice. "Knock it off. Look, there's only 2 of them. One's hurt and the other can't possibly take on both of us." "They have magic powers, idiot," Winter shot back. "Well, if she could tell the future, I don't think she'd be here right now," Keebly countered. "Look, you can't tell your sister. Just let me talk to them, okay? Go take a swim and chill out." Winter huffed, very dramatically. "Let me up," he sulked. "You promise you won't fly away?" Keebly checked. Winter eyed him. "Fine," he snarled. "I promise." Keebly stepped off him and the Icewing shot up, shaking out his wings. He slid into the pool silently, ducking under and staring at Keebly balefully. Keebly flew across the oasis. Up close, he could smell infection. The smaller Nightwing had started shaking harder. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently. "I'm sorry about Winter. We're not going to hurt you. My name's Keebly." She studied him for a minute. She had silver scales behind each eye, and for a minute he got the strangest feeling she was looking inside of him. "I'm Moonwatcher," she said quietly, after a long moment. "Nice to meet you," Keebly smiled. "Who's your friend?" She shifted, wings flaring out a tiny bit. "My mother, Secret Keeper." "Ah." Slowly, Keebly worked the story out of her. They'd been traveling along the coast with some friends, other Nightwings, he guessed, though he understood her reluctance to say that, when they'd been attacked and separated. Secret Keeper had been injured, and Moonwatcher had been looking for a water source to try cleaning out the injuries again. She was hopelessly out of her depth, though, and clearly terrified of him and Winter, who was still watching silently from the waters. Keebly offered to help tend Secret Keeper's wounds. He had a lot of training in first aid as guard, and knew more than Moonwatcher, at least. She agreed after another strange moment where she looked at him with those deep eyes. Agreed oddly quickly, he thought, but Keebly wasn't one to waste time. So he helped remove Secret Keeper, who was unconscious, closer to the water so they could carefully wash the wounds and rebind them. Keebly helped Moon find some plants among the teeming life surrounding the oasis that would help with the infection. As they worked, he chatted with her. For a while at first it was mostly just him talking, and her nodding nervously or giving single-word answers. But eventually she started responding, and they even had a few actual exchanges. All the while, Winter floated in the water. But, Keebly thought, he looked less angry and more contemplative. Moonwatcher said they'd been traveling for a while, trying to find a good place to settle for a bit. As she talked, her eyes kept darting to the silvery white shape not far away. Keebly had never thought much about Nightwings. They were mostly gone these days. But now he wondered, why did the Icewings hunt them so fervently? Moon seemed sweet nervous, harmless. She was only trying to take care of a mother who was badly injured. Finally, Keebly had helped as much as he could. Secret Keeper, she was in a bad way. He thought Moonwatcher knew it too, but she seemed determined to help her anyways. Winter drifted closer as they pulled Secret Keeper back away from the water. Keebly waded in, shivering. The water really was frigid, and went to the Icewing. "See," he said softly. "She's just a normal dragon like you or me. She's not hurting anyone." Winter looked uncertain, but after a moment he said, "I suppose," in the tone of someone who was reevaluating his knowledge of Nightwings. "You going to tell anyone about her?" Keebly asked after a moment, not sure he wanted to know the answer. "No," Winter said finally. He stood and followed Keebly to the shore, water dripping from him like molten silver. "Nightwing," he said softly. "We won't tell anyone about you or your mother," Winter said stiffly. She clawed at the sand nervously, but again nodded, strangely trusting. "I believe you," she whispered. "Thank you." Keebly dipped his snout. "Good luck," he said. She nodded again, silently, and he and Winter took their leave. It was time they got back to the palace. Wouldn't want anyone to miss the fancy Icewing prince, after all. They got back to the Sandwing Palace as the sun was rising. Unsurprisingly, nobody had even noticed Winter was gone. He didn't let that get to him. Instead, he and Keebly found a cook who owed Keebly a favor so they could get some food. He had a lot of thinking to do. Moonwatcher had not been what Winter had always learned about Nightwings. She wasn't cruel or selfish or even particularly dangerous. She'd been a dragon their age whose mother was badly injured, who'd had good reason to think that Winter would do the same to her. He almost had. He wouldn't admit it, but Winter was glad Keebly had stopped him. It felt like a turning point now. He had almost done something he didn't think he could live with. But that was a dangerous thought, and he needed some time to chew on it. Keebly had to leave for guard duty not long after, and nobody had come for Winter, so he simply found a quiet library to curl up in to nap and mull over his thoughts. He enjoyed the peace there for some time, dozing in the cool air, before his maybe friend burst back in the doors. "Winter!" he shouted. "I'm so glad I found you. Someone found out about Moonwatcher and the Icewings just left to find her and her mother." Winter's head shot up in surprise. "How?" he blurted. "I don't know," Keebly shouted, "but we have to go stop them." He turned to duck back out the door. Winter scrambled, claws scraping the horrible stone floor, and grabbed Keebly's tail right as he fled the room. A moment later he let go, cursing himself for forgetting the Sandwing's barb. Keebly had almost stabbed him in the talon on reflex. "Wait," Winter hissed slowly, now that they were out in the hall. "You can't just go charging after them." "Why not?" Keebly demanded. "They left half an hour ago. I'm running out of time to—" "To what?" Winter snapped. "Start an international incident? Get killed?" "International!" Keebly scoffed. "They're in my kingdom." "Icewing is a royal," Winter said, "and they outnumber you, and they are trained to hunt Nightwings," he said weakly. Keebly scowled. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't just abandon Moonwatcher and her mom. They're not hurting anyone. They haven't done anything wrong." Winter shook his head. "No," he agreed. "But even if you follow, Icicle will just attack you, and you'll be outnumbered." Silently fuming, Keebly lashed his tail a few times, looking deep in thought. A day ago, Winter would have laughed if anyone had told him the Sandwing Guard could be so serious. Would your queen take your side in this?" Winter asked before he could even think about it. Keebly perked up suddenly. "Oh," he said. "Thorn would," he added. "I bet she doesn't even know about this. She wouldn't let strangers attack dragons in her kingdom without sending Sandwings with them, and the Icewings left alone." Winter swallowed. Was he really about to do this? Advise someone in working against his sister? "Queen Thorn could order them to turn the Nightwings over to her," he offered slowly. "This isn't their kingdom, and they're guests. Icicle would be hesitant to anger your queen, especially since she's so new. We don't know how she might respond, but that may also cause trouble for our kingdom's alliance." Keebly squared his shoulders. Let's go talk to Thorn, he said, still annoyingly persistent in ignoring titles. She'll help us. They hurried through the palace, asking passers-by where the queen was until they found her. She was talking with a pair of hunters, Winter thought, though he doubted Keeley would have minded if they were visiting royalty. He barged between them without hesitation. Thorn, he said, I need your help. Winter's scales pricked. Once again he waited for the queen to smack him or order him silent. Instead, the reddish sandwing turned with an odd look on her face. Like she wasn't surprised, just disappointed, maybe? Well, she asked ruefully, nodding in farewell to the other two dragons. She turned to Keeley. Winter slowed a few paces behind him, dipping into a bow. What have you managed now? Keeley explained quickly and softly to her that the Icewings had left to hunt a pair of Nightwings found in the area. Then, under Thorn's knowingly raised eyebrow, he admitted that he'd met them the night before. You and Winter, I suppose? The queen asked, turning her gaze on him. Winter nodded respectfully. I was there, Your Majesty. How interesting, she said. Thorn, Keeley blurted. You can't let them do this. They're not even sandwings. Thorn shifted. Keeley, it complicates things. We're in the middle of trade negotiations right now. He stamped a foot passionately. I know, but Moonwatcher and Secret Keeper haven't done anything wrong. Thorn's dark eyes were darting between the two of them, lingering on Winter. What do you think, Prince? She asked slowly. Winter straightened nervously. He said. What did he think? Keeley was right. Ugh. And those Nightwings weren't harming anyone. Icicle was hunting them like they were seals or foxes, and they'd not done anything to deserve it. My sister is overeager, he said softly. The two Nightwings we met seemed to want to be left alone more than anything, he added. Thor nodded. I have a plan, then, she said. I will send guards after the Icewings with orders for them to give the Nightwings to me instead of killing them. I'll have them put in the dungeon. And then tonight, who knows, she said, shrugging. They're Nightwings. Perhaps they'll escape. Without pitting us against our allies, she added, sharply. Keeley stilled, thinking. That's smart, he said, as if his queen needed his approval. I'll send my fastest guards, Thorn said, and turned to move swiftly away. We're going, Keeley added, following. Winter felt his wings jerk in surprise. I can't, he said softly. Keeley turned to look at him. Icicle, he hesitated. She'll kill me. Winter shuffled his talons. If she thinks I'm against her. I'm not a Sandwing, he whispered. I go home soon, and at home she's the heir to the Icewing throne. Keeley huffed but nodded. I'll find you when we're back, he said, and dashed away, leaving Winter alone in the hallway. After the flurry of activity that was the Sandwing party leaving, Winter was too anxious to do much more than pace. What would happen? Would his sister come back furious? Would Keeley come back disappointed? And what would Winter do? Maybe it was being in a new place. Maybe he'd spent too much time with the irrepressible Sandwing, but Winter felt twitchy. Ever since Hailstorm had died, he'd been like dirty snow to his family. He felt useless. And now he wondered what kind of dragons they were. Dragons who hunted Nightwings like Moonwatcher and called it nobility? His tribe had been doing that for centuries. He barely remembered the story explaining why. What would he do when everyone returned? The Icewings were back first, in a perfectly horrible mood, which gave Winter an odd feeling of hope. He avoided his sister, waiting in the meager shade of the courtyard for the Sandwings to return. They were back minutes later. Thorn's guards, a pale tan and yellow group broken by one distinctive black dragon. One. A few guards broke away with the Nightwing, who had to be Moonwatcher, and flew in a different direction, towards what Winter assumed were the dungeons. The other guards dispersed, and one, apparently Keeley, flew straight for him. What happened? Winter demanded as soon as he landed. Keeley looked angry. They beat us there, he spat. Not by much. They killed Secret Keeper before we could stop them. Winter shifted. Is Moonwatcher okay? He asked. She'll be all right, Keeley said, eyes drifting toward a section of the palace. Probably the dungeons. Your sister's pretty mad. Winter huffed wryly. I suppose, he said. This isn't right, Keeley muttered, glaring at his claws. Winter swallowed. What even was his life? Patience, he said. We'll work it out soon. In the deepest part of the night, the two of them snuck into the dungeons. They were mostly empty, but Keeley had insisted Winter come. He wanted backup, he said, and he was certain Thorn meant for them to quietly help Moonwatcher escape tonight, so the blame couldn't be put on the Sandwings. They found Moon's cell with little trouble. Keeley had asked his fellow guards casually earlier in the day where it was. She was crouched inside, watching them with wide, glittering eyes as they walked up. Hey, Keeley said, hurrying to the bars. Moonwatcher, I'm so sorry about your mother, he said. She cringed back from them a bit. What do you want? She asked. Her voice was rough. In the dark, Winter couldn't see if she was injured. We're here to help you escape, Keeley said softly. Thorn and I are trying to save you without ticking off the entire Icewing kingdom. Moonwatcher's eyes darted to Winter at that, and he exhaled. I offer my deepest apologies, he said, after only a moment's hesitation. We've wronged you. I'm trying to make it right. She shook out her wings and slowly stood up. Was she favoring her back talon? I trust you, she said, voice quivering. Winter stepped forward, taking the lock on the door in his talons. Ever so carefully, he breathed frost breath over it until it was encased in ice. Then, yanking sharply, he twisted and broke it. Keeley slipped it into a pouch so nobody would find it, and pulled the door open. Let's get you out of here, he said, offering the Nightwing a talon. Winter had almost convinced himself it'd be all right. They were almost to the door, to the freedom of the dark night outside, when voices echoed down the hall. I don't care what she said, and oh moons, that was his sister's voice. It's not our fault if she dies in her cell. She isn't under our care. Moon froze, then shrank back. Winter could feel her wings shaking again. They were so close in the tunnel. Keeley looked to Winter with wide eyes. There was absolutely nowhere to hide, and this was a long tunnel. Shamefully, Winter stood frozen long enough for his sister and another Icewing, Hoarfrost, to turn the corner and stop in shock. Winter! Icicle screeched, quick on the uptake as always. What are you doing? Winter was still frozen when Keeley darted forward, slashing at Icicle even though she was taller than him. His claws raked down her underbelly before she reacted. She shoved him away, and Keeley ducked under her wing to reach Hoarfrost. The Sandwing stabbed at Icicle with his tail while he attacked the other dragon. She managed to dodge, but he slammed Hoarfrost into the wall so hard the Icewing slumped and fell still, unconscious. Keeley turned to meet Icicle again, but she'd already moved, clawing at his back and shredding the scales there with her rigid claws. Keeley hissed and twisted, but she dug in harder. The sight of that strange red blood was like a shock to Winter. Suddenly, without meaning to, he was moving, throwing Icicle off Keeley. She howled in anger, wings flaring. What are you doing? She snapped, blue blood dripping down her front. For this little thing and this Sandwing? Icicle screeched. I always knew you were a traitor, you... Keeley bowled into her side, wings hitting her head so hard it bounced off the bars to the nearest cell. His sister stilled and went silent with a twitch of her tail. Oh, sweet moons, Winter whispered in horror. Come on, Keeley hissed. We have to go. He grabbed Winter's wing and pulled him forward, then stopped. Moonwatcher hadn't moved. Moonwatcher, Keeley said, darting back to brush wings with her. Come on, we gotta go. Guards will be coming, and we have to get out of here. What about the plan? Winter hissed, as Moonwatcher dazedly followed Keeley. They saw you, Keeley hissed. So unless you want me to kill your sister and start a war, we need to get out of the palace so Thorn can say she doesn't know what happened. What? Winter said. You think Icicle's just gonna let this go? Keeley hissed. Look, Thorn won't be upset, but we can't let our kingdoms go to war. I know a place we can lay low for a while until the Icewings leave. Until then, we need to get out of here. They burst through the dungeon doors and took off, Winter following Keeley more on instinct than anything else. Had all that really just happened? He felt like he was watching from outside his head. It'll be okay, Keeley promised as they flew. You did the right thing, he said. Thank you. Blood flew from his shoulders in tiny drops as his wings worked. Winter nodded silently. Keeley was right. Icicle was going to kill him, and then Moonwatcher, and then maybe Winter too. He'd done the right thing. For once, Winter suddenly felt like it was the most right thing he'd done in his life. Holy wow, that was so long! Guys, this was not meant to be this long. But things just kept taking time, and they wanted to talk and have feelings, and my goodness, and I wanted to split it into 2 parts, but there wasn't just a good spot to do that, and whew. So anyways, enjoy this take on what might have happened if the Nightwings got defeated by the Icewings. I think they would probably be much less isolationist, and they still have animus dragons, so they're pretty feared and respected by the other tribes, and they spread a bunch of anti-Nightwing propaganda and just keep killing them when they find them. And I think it's long past time to wrap this baby up, so remember to check out the description for links to my socials, and I have other, usually shorter, what-ifs if you're interested in that too. Thank y'all for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and have a blessed day.